A few quick questions. Yes?
Thank you for that very thought-provoking, entertaining lecture. I couldn't agree with you more that there is a need to have a public discourse about the intrusion of markets into public life and into character and where we want to go with this. What I also see as a part of the intrusion of markets into public life is the erosion of domains where you can have that conversation. So there suddenly our friends are all on Facebook, which is a public company. Suddenly there's, well, as of yesterday, then there's, you know, our church institutions are not as strong as they used to be. Our communities are not as tight. They're more permeable and more transient. So, and then you turn perhaps to your political system thinking perhaps these values will be somehow discussed in that public forum, and you know, and yet you know that the ultimate game of those public forums is for the accumulation of power, which is another sort of currency, and the accumulation of votes, and it isn't in some ways an honest discussion.
Yeah.
So where does one have this conversation, and with whom?
Yeah, it's good. Well, a very good question. I think that it's true, there seem to be fewer and fewer places where we can have serious discussion of values, where there may be disagreement, but civility and respect, listening to one another, including on big moral questions on which we may disagree. One of the developments in our public life that has coincided, I think, with the last 3 decades of market triumphalism is a hollowing out of our public discourse. Our public discourse increasingly is managerial and technocratic, which inspires no one, or where passion enters, shouting past one another. And I think that we need to find ways to get beyond this. I think the media has a role to play because too much of the media encourages and rewards the shouting matches rather than sustained, serious reflection and deliberation on big questions. Certainly the political parties have a responsibility, though I doubt they will meet it unless they are encouraged, even demanded to do so by citizens. I think institutions of higher education have a responsibility to equip citizens with the ability to reason in public about hard questions involving ethics, justice, the common good, what it is to be a citizen. I think religious institutions and communities can be sites for this kind of public discussion, as well as other institutions and social movements within civil society. But I think it's a very serious question. Yes?
I'm pretty sure that lots of people in this room are in favor of the high tax in cigarettes because it would compensate to the cost of them further being treated in the life for cigarette-related sicknesses. I'm pretty sure that would not be the case if there was a tax on fatty food.
So you'd be in favor of such a tax?
I wouldn't.
Wouldn't be?
I wouldn't be in favor of such tax because, to me, it has to do with personal liberty. But I just want to see what is your view on the difference between a fatty food tax and a cigarette tax?
Well, I'm not sure I would draw the sharp distinction that you do between them. I think there may be a closer analogy between them.
That's
So
how I see it.
Right.
I just want
That's
to
good.
see your view.
Yes.
It's a little bit light, but we're linking morality and money, so maybe we just need to give money a bit of a makeover.
To give money?
A bit of a makeover. It's got a bit of a sort of bad reputation at the moment.
So how would you go about it?
And you wonder whether that's part of the debate here, because obviously we treat money as a negative in so many instances, and it is the currency we use in the Western world to trade with each other, to get on in life, to do all the things that we do. So, you know, it's a hard question, isn't it? I mean, this is what we're, I guess, debating.
It is a hard question. That's why we're gathered
here,
to try to sort
And in
it
this
out.
age of makeovers, surely money could be given one as well. That's my point.
Good, thanks.
I've got two takeaways from what you said. One is that you're really talking about the idea that introducing money, it makes us reframe the problem. And this kind of process of reframing kind of changes the way we make decisions or changes our behavior. So first of all, I was wondering if that's what you're talking about. And if we take money away from this, do you say we have, instead of money, we have candy. Now, I'm looking at my 2-year-old son, who seems to have an extremely good understanding of the ideas of exchange. We don't use money, we use candy, but it does incentivize him in certain ways. Now, that's one question. The other thing I wanted to ask you is, are you basically arguing that we should have situations where we have no expectation of reciprocity in an exchange situation? So basically we have like a perfect gift, a gift where we don't expect anything in back, which theoretically, a lot of people argue doesn't exist. So I just have your views on those two things.
Right. I'm not suggesting that there are cases, we should try to find cases where there is no expectation of reciprocity. But that's very different from marketizing a thing. Think about it this way. Suppose a friend asked you, a friend was moving out of a flat and needed help moving a mattress. And they said, will you come help me? You might well say yes. Suppose instead they said, come help me and I'll pay you £3 for it. Then would you be more or less likely to help? Probably less. Because, in fact, you might, if it were a close friend, even be insulted by the offer. And so it's, now, what does that have to do with the expectation of reciprocity? Well, you might sort of do it as a friend, free, out of friendship. And part of being a friend is an expectation of not an exact reciprocal act, but maybe some other kind of favor later, but without being specified. So there is a certain kind of expectation. It's not specified, it's not written down in any contract. You don't ask them to sign before you move the mattress. Will you do some good deed to me later at some specified time? And yet it's not a market relation. There's an element of reciprocity, but it's not spelled out. It's what it is to be a friend, to be open to these possibilities. As for the candy, money is not the only form of extrinsic motivation that can crowd out intrinsic motivation. And candy or gold stars sometimes can have a similar effect, especially in teaching. Yes?
Thank you. I do think that public discourse should center on helping the poor and the vulnerable, especially. There's a tendency to assume that everyone has equal means if we should let markets decide the question. With your example of paying $300 for drug-addicted women to sterilize themselves and not be able to have children, it does seem that it's a matter of one organization which is using rational, consequentialist-based arguments for whatever, to advance their cause, pitted against people who are addicted to drugs, perhaps less likely to be able to think rationally, certainly without the financial freedom to easily say no. As such, I think there's a large asymmetry of the relative bargaining powers between the two parties, and this to me sounds very exploitative, does not seem to respect human dignity of anyone.
Yeah. Well, you've identified one objection to buying and selling things under condition of inequality. One party, it may be a voluntary exchange, strictly speaking, but if an affluent person from the US or the UK buys a kidney from a poor Indian peasant, it may be a voluntary exchange, and yet we might say the bargaining positions are so unequal that there's an element of exploitation here. This arises also in debates about surrogate motherhood, paid pregnancy. In India, they've legalized paid pregnancy to cater to Western couples who want to come and hire Indian women to bear pregnancies. A similar issue could be raised. Is this, given the poverty, the money is so attractive, is there an element of exploitation? So that is one objection to markets. But a second objection to markets, independent of that one, is paying someone to relinquish an organ or to bear a child and give it up for money degrading? independent of whether it's exploitative, is it degrading? These are actually two different objections. The first one has to do with there not being a level playing field when the deal is made, so that the choice isn't truly free. That's the worry, your worry, and it's a legitimate one. But even if the choice is freely made, there may be some choices that implicate us in a form of self-degradation that we've chosen. And that's why debates about markets in organs, kidneys, let's say, or markets in pregnancy, surrogacy, are so difficult. I think they involve these two different kinds of moral debates. One, what is truly free choice? And two, even if the choice is free, is there something intrinsically degrading about, and this arises in debates about prostitution. Suppose there were not dire poverty. Would there still be something degrading about selling sex? And people disagree about this, but the degradation argument, it's worth noticing, is independent of the equality argument. And I think both of these need to be part of the debate that we have. One last question. Go ahead.
I don't know if this is a question or more of an observation. I did notice people talk about personal liberties, and we aren't addressing, I guess, common good. A few years in the UK, we talked about decriminalizing marijuana, and there were many sort of arguments for and against it. And having worked a little in the mental health sphere, I realized that, marijuana does cause a lot of mental health issues, and so I was against it, but I can understand why you'd want to legalize it. But I think, I wonder if this degradation is the fact that we've stopped talking about what's good for us all as opposed to what's good for me.
Yeah, well, thank you for that observation. I think another way of putting my point, and part of what inspires the book, is a sense that our public discourse is not going well. It's not just that markets have expanded. Markets, in a way, have expanded to fill a void that's been created in our public life for our failure to engage more directly with substantive questions about the common good. And so the reason to try to find our way to a morally more robust, engaged public discourse is partly that it's the only way we're going to be able to decide what the role of money in markets should be. But it also matters for a further reason, that we need to, if we're to lift up our public discourse, we need to encourage and invite democratic citizens to reason together in a way we hesitate to do because it's difficult, to reason together about big questions of justice and moral disagreements and the common good. Thank you all very much.